subscribe now and press the bell icon. Never miss an update.
Hello and welcome to Health Live at Seniors Today. This is that time of the year when air quality levels really go down. It used to be a phenomenon more in Delhi, but I can see that happening in Mumbai, in cities like Pune, where there's huge amount of construction activity happening. Road construction, metros, coastal roads, new flyovers, etc. happening, and the casualty is the air quality. There seems to be no respite from that. And earlier this week, when we found that the air quality levels have really gone down, not just in Delhi and in Mumbai as well, and including Pune, where I now live, I spoke with Dr. Aditya Agrawal. Dr. Aditya Agrawal has been a friend of Seniors Today, and he has been here on our sessions 8 times in the past. So this is his 9th appearance, and he has written cover stories for us, written stories in the magazine. So every reason that we turn to him for conducting this session. Before we start, what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce Dr. Agrawal. Dr. Agrawal is a leading consultant pulmonologist attached to several large hospitals in Mumbai, that is the Breach Candy, Bombay Hospital, Bhabha Hospital. He is extensively trained in respiratory diseases, both in India and in the US. And he is now even trained and has qualified to practice in the United Kingdom. His special interests are difficult to treat cough, asthma, bronchitis, and lung fibrosis, and runs a specialized clinic for patients with chronic cough. He's a dedicated researcher and a peer influencer in the management of respiratory diseases. Welcome to Health Live at Seniors Today, Dr. Agrawal. How have you been?
Very well. Thank you so much for inviting me once again. It's always a pleasure to come back to the Seniors Today and probably help, learn, and teach both at the same time. Again, I think we want to speak about air pollution, which we have spoken about in the past. At least I've spoken here.
You have,
It's a
Doctor, but it's just that, every morning I look at the Sulphur app on my mobile, and I find that the air quality levels are have gone down so much that one wonders. And I know that behind you there's an air purifier, and you have been and we've discussed this in the past. How are you? Before we get on to your presentation, I invite you for your presentation. I also invite people to ask questions. How do you cope with the pollution levels in Mumbai?
uh, as I've already told you in the past, I am a human just like everybody else. I have a family history of allergies. I've lived with allergies all my life, had tonsillectomy as a child. I've had asthma, I've had allergic rhinitis, I've had eczema and now urticaria because of allergies. And this last 15 days have been really difficult for me both
Doctor, this is the
personally.
air pollution level in Colaba as of now, the place, around where you are.
Wow.
So, this is how it is, unfortunately. But yeah, anyway, go ahead, doctor.
Wow, that's really sad.
In Pune, which is supposed to be, a clean and green city, it is 162.
Wow.
And if I look at Delhi overall, hold your breath, it's 504. Then these are government of India AQI levels. Of course, one must remember that these are AQI levels, not these meters are not in housing complexes where there is some greens, etc. They are on roads, they are on highways, etc. But still, it's really bad. So anyway, sorry to halt your chain of thought, but let's hear it from you. Those of you who are here, as always, put your question in the Q&A tab. Mention your age and gender in case you have a very specific question about that concerns you. But otherwise, we will take all general questions. Of course, we prefer to take questions only from senior citizens, that is above the age of 60. But if there are some issues which concern your grandchildren, etc., we'll be happy to also look at those concerns. Over to you, doctor.
As you spoke about the air quality level in Colaba, I was just looking back at what the air quality index in my room is. And the air quality monitor in my room says my air quality index is a dismal 6. And this is what I live in. That's because I need to protect myself and obviously everybody around me. Uh, so I'll start with my presentation today. Is that okay?
Yes, yes, please go ahead.
Okay. So I'm Aditya Agrawal, and I'm at the Bombay Hospital, Beach Candy, and the Bhartiya Hospital. And very recently, we've just founded a foundation called the Breath First Foundation, which is actually involved in educating people, educators, doctors with regards to respiratory illnesses. This is what we actually wake up to every morning. The air quality is so bad that we can barely see across the bay at buildings. We can barely see things which are 100 meters away. The haze is definitely affecting, and this is how we Mumbaikars actually bid adieu to monsoons. Now, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to introduce to you what pollution is, what the impact on respiratory health is, and what are the strategies to mitigate the impact of pollution, or how we can mitigate the effect of pollution on respiratory health. So, when we speak about pollution, air pollution is the only thing that we speak about. Very often, we speak about water pollution because we see lots of junk in the water around Marine Drive. We speak about noise pollution, but the only time we speak about noise pollution is around festivals when we have loud drums. Nobody speaks about soil pollution, radioactive pollution, because we barely ever understand what's happening around us. Now, when we speak about air pollution, we need to understand that air pollution can be of several types. There can be primary pollutants and secondary pollutants, and I'll speak more about it in a while. There can be natural sources, there can be other man-made sources such as vehicular traffic, factories, etc. Now, when I speak about pollution, I'll speak about where the pollution is located. Is it inside your home? Is it outside your home? Indoor air pollution or outdoor air pollution? What type of pollutant? That is there a primary pollutant or a secondary air pollutant? And by the composition, that is it just a noxious gas, or is it particulate matter, particles which are floating about in the air? Now, when we speak about common air pollutants, we speak about particulate matter, ground level ozone. That means ozone which is building up or at the level of the ground, carbon monoxide, which usually is formed when there is combustion or burning in an enclosed environment. This may not be very relevant for Bombay because we don't have very severe winters, but this becomes an extremely important factor in colder climes where people use wood or heaters to keep themselves warm. And that's where carbon monoxide levels increase. Now, in the West, I often have seen that most homes would have a carbon monoxide monitor installed so that in case there is a dangerous level of carbon monoxide, the people in the home are alerted and hence they can take the necessary measures to reduce the carbon monoxide. But in India, we seldom ever find carbon monoxide monitors in the homes. Sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxide, and lead are the other common air pollutants. But ever since the government of India has woken up to reduce or rather stop addition of lead to the petrol, we see that the in the lead is a significantly less important air pollutant. Now, we have pollution which is created everywhere. It could be agriculture related, it could be desert related, which is a desert dust. It could be because of vehicles, vehicular transport. It could be anything from road transport or uh, sea transport. Then you have factories which produce large quantities of gases. You have uh, then you have cities which produce large quantities of noxious waste, and all these rise up into the atmosphere and thus affect the production of ozone. Now, when we speak about primary air pollutants, carbon oxides are usually produced by burning fossil fuel. Nitrogen dioxide are produced because Nitrogen and oxygen combine at very high temperatures at from exhaust of the vehicles, factories, and power plants. Sulfur dioxide is usually produced by the coal that is burned. Toxic heavy metals like mercury come from smokestacks. Volatile organic compounds are extremely important, and this is one of the most important reasons for indoor air pollution. We often find that even simple things like a fresh coat of paint produces large quantities of volatile organic compounds, which may be released into the atmosphere, indoor air, for months at a time after painting. And then, very often overlooked are the cattle raising, which raises a large quantity of methane gas, which is an extremely sensitive environmental pollutant. And then you have the particulates, which are solid particles, which may be in the form of ash, dust, or even animal waste. Many of these animal wastes are actually burnt as fossil fuel. Now, secondary air pollutants are basically ones which form from the primary pollutant, and they may occur as a part of a photochemical smog, seen as a brown haze. And this photochemical smog forms when certain pollutants have a chemical reaction in the presence of sunlight, and this consists mainly of ozone. Ozone in the higher levels of the atmosphere is protective, wherein it protects the earth from the ultraviolet rays, but ozone at the level of the ground or the earth is extremely harmful to humans and other living things. Uh, Now, this is how it is formed. Ozone, where nitrogen oxides and volatile organic compounds combine and react in the presence of sunlight to form ozone. They are baked together by the sunlight, so to say. Why is particle pollution a respiratory health concern? Particle pollution causes respiratory symptoms such as cough, phlegm production, and even wheezing in patients who have had airway disease. It causes an acute reversible reduction in the pulmonary function. It causes inflammation in the mucosa of the nose, throat, and the lungs. It causes bronchial hyperreactivity, where any new foreign product going into the lung would cause the bronchial walls to constrict. It's an acute reaction. It increases the risk for respiratory tract infections. It also increases the number of emergency department visits for patients, and obviously it results in higher numbers of respiratory disease associated hospitalizations. Children who are growing up in contaminated or polluted environments are known to have decreased lung function, and presence of pollution, air pollution, is known to retard or slow down the growth of a growing child. It also causes chronic loss of pulmonary function in adults. It can also result in early mortality or premature mortality in patients with chronic lung disease. Air pollution is a silent killer. It can affect almost every organ of the body, and it is responsible for millions of deaths each year. Now, the magnitude of importance or impact of pollution in terms of morbidity and mortality is such. A very large population is affected in terms of decreased lung function, the cardiac side effects, and inflammation. Patients with chronic lung disease who are fewer in number would have increased respiratory symptoms with asthma attacks or bronchitis attacks and the need for increased medication. It causes increased number of doctor visits, hospitalizations, lost days at school or at work. In a much smaller population, we find that pollution causes severe cardiovascular morbidity, where patients may even have heart attacks. As I explained before, ER emergency room visits and hospitalization. and in the very few patients, it can result in increased number of deaths. How does particle pollution affect the respiratory system? Particles get deposited in the respiratory tract and they induce inflammation or injury. The extent of injury depends upon the particle size, its composition, and the dose. Airway inflammation increases the responsiveness to irritants. That means once the patient's airways are inflamed or injured, they react easily or more easily to future irritants. At a cellular level, the inflammation causes damage or kills cells in the respiratory tract, and thus it compromises the integrity of the lung and the capillary barrier, thus allowing the host defenses to be lowered and increased risk of infection. Repeated exposure results in chronic inflammation and injury. The overall balance between injury and repair is altered because of the exposure to pollution, and this results in progression of the inflammatory disease into a more chronic disease. That means a more long-standing disease. Inhalation of particle pollution may affect the stability or progression of these conditions through the inflammatory effects in the respiratory tree. Why is particle pollution a respiratory health concern? These particles can enter the body through the skin, through the eyes, through the nose, through the mouth, etc. Now, these particles are then transferred via the blood, the lymphatics to different corners of the body and thus affect the lung, the cardiovascular system, the nervous system, etc. What are the respiratory effects of acute exposure? That means if you are suddenly exposed, what could happen? Worsening of respiratory symptoms, that means increased risk of cough, breathlessness, wheezing, etc. Reduced lung function, as it's a repetition. There have been studies done in the past which say that pollution can result in serious emergency department visits, and this includes diseases such as COPD exacerbations or respiratory tract infections. There have been studies, both experimental and real life studies, which have provided evidence showing a relationship between daily exposure to particle pollution and long term respiratory related effects, including increased disease, increased frequency of hospitalization or need for doctors, as well as increased risk of mortality. And patients who have had lung disease in the past are at the greatest risk for the respiratory complications due to pollution. Chronic exposure again leads to similar dysfunction. Now, what are the respiratory effects? The respiratory effects actually start even before a child is born. So there is intrauterine growth retardation, that means exposure of a mother, of a pregnant female to pollution can result in death of the fetus in the womb. It can cause increased risk for preterm birth. It can result in a low birth weight child, which in turn has several deleterious effects on the growth of a child. It causes reduced lung function and a smaller lung size. It can result in repeated respiratory tract infections for a newborn. There are several genetic changes that are associated with with exposure to pollution, which include alteration of the DNA. There could be reduction in the size of a telomere, and these are small parts of the DNA. When they are affected, they can result in several diseases, including cancers. Now, exposure to pollution causes a retardation in the fetal growth and increased inflammation. It also causes a significant amount of immunological response and oxidative stress. Hence, the common thing that most people today do are seek oxidative, or rather seek medicines to prevent oxidative damage. Then it can result in airway diseases such as asthma and bronchiolitis or bronchitis. It can affect the deepest corners of the lung, which are called alveoli, resulting in infection such as pneumonia, or result in a more long-term reduction in the lung function and hence the growth. How does particle pollution affect patients with asthma? So when you look at the 11 o'clock picture, you see that this is a normal, or rather this is the airway, the tube of a patient with mild asthma. There is some amount of constriction. The area which is pink, like colored light pink, is the muscle, and the red color is the space available for the air to pass through. And as we see in asthma with exposure to the pollution, the space available for the air to pass through keeps shrinking. And as it becomes more severe, a large quantity of phlegm or bulgum, which is known, collects inside the tube. Along with that, the total amount of area available for the air to pass through reduces significantly, thus preventing easy exhalation of air. Now, how does particle pollution affect people with asthma? Airway hyperreactivity, that means the patient's lungs react very quickly. They cause bronchoconstriction, that means they become constricted or narrowed. It causes increased deposition of these pollutants inside the airways, that is the tubes, and sometimes it results in this deposition in the corners of the lung because of both obstruction and increased airflow in parts of the lung which are normal. Most of the particulate pollution is pro-inflammatory, that means it induces an injury in the lung. It can aggravate a pre-existing airway injury or increase the mechanisms of injury, and it oftentimes accelerates the injury cascade. Allergens are a major factor in asthma exacerbation, and the intensity of symptoms and bronchial hyperresponsiveness changes with allergen sensitization. That means how attuned a person is to exposure to a particular antigen or allergen. Patients with allergic asthma are at increased risk for particle pollution related health effects during times of high allergen exposure. Now, what are the strategies to mitigate harmful effects of pollution? Introduction to the air quality standards. Now, before we started the talk, we were discussing air quality standards, the AQI, and what we need to understand is we can actually look into the little app because most municipalities in the country give you the air quality index at certain places in your city. The most common air quality index measurement that we use are PM 2.5 and PM 10, which actually measures the particles in micrograms per cubic meter. And PM 2.5 refers to the microscopic particles which are less than 2.5 micron in diameter, while PM 10 refers to the concentration of particles which are less than 10 microns in diameter. So it's very important. We already introduced everybody to air quality standards, and I think from now on, most people will try to wake up every morning and try to figure out how the air quality standards are. Now, why am I stressing upon introduction to air quality standards? It's because Oftentimes, if your city is extremely polluted, it may not actually be polluted through the day to the same measure. You could use historical data, or you could use data from the previous few days to understand at what time of the day the air pollution levels are lower. Hence, you can plan your day accordingly such that you can spend your outdoor hours during the time when the air pollution is significantly less. The other strategies would be to help reduce outdoor and indoor air pollution. And we as conscientious citizens would have to do our bit. There is a technological advancement in pollution control, and I think today we would have to adopt these changes in a hurry. And this is obviously not an individual effort, it's a collective effort which is going to help reduce pollution. We have to have public health measures in place to reduce the effect of pollution on respiratory health of patients. Now, simple things that we can do are leave the car at home, use public transport, or switch over to electric cars, electric vehicles. It's better to walk or cycle, like many Europeans do, to reduce our carbon footprint, to reduce our reliance on fossil fuel to power our vehicles. Choose cleaner routes. That means if you have the luxury of having a forested road or a road with a higher number of trees around, try using those roads so that the pollution which is actually emitted by the vehicles is absorbed by the trees. Wear a mask when you are outdoors. Avoid burning. That means avoid burning leaves, garbage, trees, etc. Ventilate your home very well. Allow there to be cross ventilation. Allow there to be a natural flow of air with open windows. And most importantly, do not smoke indoor or outdoor. Now, while we are speaking about pollution, it's also important to empower individuals to protect the respiratory health. Education is an extremely important tool to help reduce pollution. I need to expose you to the tips, the strategies to minimize exposure, which I've already spoken to you about, which is both outdoor and indoor. So, when I speak about indoor mitigation strategies for indoor air pollution, I would say use clean fuels and stoves, avoid the use of wood and biomass fuel if you ever are doing so, or if you know somebody who is doing so. Make sure that the home is well ventilated so that the smoke does not remain in the home. Ensure that your home has significant amount of ventilation so that there is a good amount of reduction in the total amount of particulate matter. Use air cleaners if the natural ways to mitigate air pollution aren't sufficient. Uh, so when I was speaking about air pollution, I also need to mention one more thing, that which are the populations most at risk for air pollution associated lung disease? They are the ones who are at the extremes of it, that means children and the elderly, a newborn, or rather a child which hasn't been born yet, patients with cardiovascular diseases, and pregnant women. Thank you. I'll be open to answer questions, please.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Thank you very much. Very detailed presentation, and you've answered most of the questions that people can ask. Uh, Doctor, there are a few questions that have come, at least four questions that have come, and I've also gotten the messages. is ways and means in which one can protect oneself. So, specifically, the question is: mask, should a normal mask do, or should it be only an N95?
Well, if the air quality is not very severe, like if it's less than 300, a double ply mask would help. But when the pollution level you just showed me in Delhi at 500 would necessitate the use of masks such as the N95 mask, which can actually reduce the total amount of particulate matter significantly.
All right. And Doctor, what about air purifiers? We've discussed this in the past, and this is a question which keeps coming up. But would you recommend that people, have air purifiers in their homes, even for people, even with air quality levels moderate, like they are in Mumbai, and not as high as it's in Delhi?
Well, if I have no suggestion for or against air purifiers. You have to understand, are you somebody at high risk for respiratory diseases or exacerbation of your chronic respiratory condition because of air pollution? Has it bothered you in the past? Has it bothered you such that you're required to take medications or you've required hospitalization? Then yes, it would be wise to invest in an air purifying machine, such as an air purifier. But I would not recommend this for a layman who is not majorly affected, because what that would do is it would create a mad dash to the store to buy air purifiers, like you mentioned yesterday, that air purifiers are very difficult to get hold of in the city of Delhi today. Now, I explained who should be the one who should be using an air purifier. Extremes of age, more vulnerable patients, not everyone.
Right. And Doctor, we have Marjorie Fernandez, who said that it's all right to have it inside the home, but when you're outside, what does one do? And you have, of course, mentioned that no about restricting people from going out. But would you, since a lot of our senior citizens go out for a walk, would you recommend that they should not go out for a walk early in the morning?
Definitely, most definitely. I would recommend them go for their walk later in the day, not early mornings when the air temperature is low and the cold air tends to stagnate towards the surface of Earth, hence causing a significant amount of smog formation. Uh, then you use the air quality monitors which the cities have installed and check at what particular time of the day your area is experiencing the least amount of pollution. Plan your activities around that time. The other important thing that you could do is possibly wear a mask. If you need to travel via public transport where your carbon footprint is significantly low. The other important factor while using public transport is that usually they are enclosed. So your exposure to environmental pollution is significantly reduced. I'll quote a simple example. A study which was done many years ago in Pune showed that a person traveling on a motorcycle or a cycle is significantly more exposed to the outdoor air pollution than somebody who's traveling in an auto rickshaw, while somebody who's traveling in an auto rickshaw or a motorcycle is significantly at a higher risk or has been exposed to more air pollution than someone who's traveling in a bus, while a person who's traveling in a bus is exposed to more air pollution than somebody who's traveling in a car which is air conditioned. All that means is that when you are using public transport, you actually or enclosed transport, you reduce your exposure to outdoor air pollution.
Right. Doctor, we have a question from uh, uh, Marjorie Fernandez again. Is it a good idea to keep the windows open in the house when air pollution is very high outside? What happens to ventilation if the AQI is 500? Jagmohan Sani asks.
I mean, isn't this question self-explanatory? If the air pollution outdoors is significantly high, you obviously need to prevent that air pollution from entering your home. And while you're doing that, you also need to ensure that your home is not producing large quantities of indoor air pollution. I did not mention in significant detail what indoor air pollution pollutants could be. They could be indoor cooking, it could be use of sprays, it could be use of air, air fresheners, it could be use of perfumes and deodorants, it could be any other particulate matter, hairsprays. So you need to avoid using them to help reduce pollution both indoors and outdoors.
And doctor, one must also clean the air conditioner filters. It's just not necessary that because you have an air conditioner, you have regulated air coming in. I think it's also important uh, to get filters. We have a question, doctor, from someone says that is it a good idea to get a chest checkup done in this time of the year, or is it after the winter?
If you're somebody who has a history of respiratory tract infections, it's important that you see your doctor just before the pollution starts. Ensure that your respiratory condition is well controlled. If not, take the necessary precautions and get adequate medication to control your chronic respiratory or cardiovascular condition. Uh, Frequent health checkups are dissuaded. I would recommend you only seek a doctor's advice when you are ill. I am not a proponent of health checkups.
Right. Uh, Thank you, doctor. Doctor, I know it's an incorrect question to ask you, but we have a question which has come in, and I was also, after reading the question, I also did a quick search on one of the e-commerce sites, and without naming any brands, what are the specifications one should look for in an air purifier? What should some do's and don'ts?
Ensure that your air purifier has a air quality monitor on it. Ensure that it's sturdy, reliable, with easy availability of filters. Otherwise, you could choose any brand. It could cost anything from a few thousand rupees to up to a lakh rupee. Ensure that the size of your air purifier matches the capacity of your room, the volume of your room. Most air purifiers would serve volume from 1,000 cubic meters to a few thousand cubic meters.
Right. What about things like HEPA and plasma and ionizer? And then are these things that one must uh, look out for? Are these important to have, or you know, is it okay if you're taking a well-known brand? You know, you can be sure that they are taking care of things.
Well, a well-known brand or more expensive brand would definitely have a lot of these features, but HEPA filters would definitely be more useful in a more sanitized environment, such as a microchip factory, a pharmaceutical factory, or a hospital. I don't think an average home would need expensive filters such as plasma filters, etc.
All right. That I think explains well to all of you over here. We've asked quite a few questions around this. Doctor, we have a couple of questions around uh, is medicine which expels cough better, which dries the cough inside? That's from Milan Mehta. Katie Dadanchi asks, Doctor, due to this air pollution, I keep getting a dry cough off and on. Should I take a cough syrup regularly or not?
It's a very specific question. I don't think this is the right forum to discuss this, but I am against most cough syrups because they do more harm than good. They should be used only under medical supervision. Your doctor should know why he is using a cough syrup, and you should avoid having cough syrups with over-the-counter sales. Very important. If your asthma is uncontrolled, seek your doctor's consult.
Right. Uh, Dr. Marjorie Fernandez asks, can high pollution cause lung diseases like COPD and ILD or only worsen them?
Well, COPD's genesis is very often cigarette smoke pollution or biomass fuel pollution. Very rarely do we find patients having genetic causes of COPD, that is alpha 1 antitrypsin deficiency. So, pollution does affect COPD. Outdoor air pollution and indoor air pollution are both known to cause interstitial lung disease, more importantly, hypersensitivity pneumonitis, which in Bombay is the most common type of interstitial lung disease, that's lung fibrosis. Most patients who come to my practice would be exposed to damp leaking walls because of old buildings or poor quality construction, or would have fungus or mold on the walls of their home or around their home. And the third most important thing is feeding pigeons and birds causes collection of excreta, collecting of the waste material which is excreted by these birds, which results in lung fibrosis. So, if you are exposed to any of these factors, I suggest you take immediate measures to reduce them. Stop feeding the birds because they can find food for themselves. When it comes to water damaged walls, have them repaired as soon as possible. If you have fungus, try seeking professional help and make sure that your fungus or mold laden walls are clean.
Right. Thank you, Doctor. We have a question, and this perhaps concerns a fair number of people in our large cities. From uh, uh, Kadim Kadim Chandra Rao, there is a municipal garbage dump more than a kilometer away from our colony. Often we are subjected to obnoxious wave of smell coming to our colony with the wind blowing our side. What prevention can the person take? It's not really possible to get the corporation to change the place of the dump, etc. So this is a common problem. Is this? I know it's not exactly the AQI that we are talking about today because this is pollution led, but it is in a sense a form of pollution.
Well, this is a very significant form of pollution. Now, waste dumps are known to secrete large quantities of methane gas, which is a volatile organic compound. The reason why you can smell something from the dump, from the waste yard, is because those chemicals are traveling in the draft of air and traveling towards your home, and hence you can smell it. So, very often we don't understand or we do not about things that we smell. Things that we smell are usually particles which go into our nose, which are sensed by our nose, and then our brain interprets it as odor, whether pleasant or unpleasant. So, what you could possibly do is make sure that you have a conversation regarding the dump yard around your home. See if they can have measures to bury the dump. See if you can shut off your windows during the hours when there's a significant amount of stench.
Right. Thank you, Doctor. Doctor, we have a few questions which are not exactly linked to the topic today. Somnatha Gupta is about, she's, saying that I'm getting frequently, say once in 3 months, cold starting with 5 sneezings at a time will come daily, 3 to 4 times each time, 5 sneezings for 4 to 5 days, and it reduces after medication, vaporization, etc. Drinking water will aggravate the cold. what are the remedies one should have? I think, as always, if there are.
I'll take this answer. I'll take this answer. This question, rather. Mrs. Gupta, you have allergic rhinitis, which is most often happening in the early mornings. What you need to do is you need to make sure that your bedroom is clean. You are suffering from indoor air pollution in your bedroom, so you need to make sure you don't have dust mite in your mattress, in your sheets, your upholstery is clean, your floors are mopped with soapy water as often as you can, and ensure that you don't have your bedroom is minimalistic so that it doesn't gather dust. Ensure that you don't use air purifiers, sorry, rather air fresheners or other sprays in your bedroom, which can cause air pollution.
Thank
I
you.
won't comment upon the medication because that's for your doctor.
We have a question from Manju Agrawal, who asks, Doctor, I get asthma attacks very frequently. Is there a vaccine to prevent them? She's 69.
So, Mrs. Manju Agarwal, I would term your type of asthma to be a difficult to treat asthma. Now, if you are getting frequent exacerbations, that means your asthma is poorly controlled. Now, when we speak about difficult to treat asthma, and I excel in treating patients with difficult or severe asthma, is that you have to identify what your triggers are. Once you have recognized your triggers and mitigated your triggers, then you have to look at your medication. Are you on the right kind of medication? Are you on the right kind of inhalers? And if you are, then we look at what kind of asthma you have. Is it driven by a certain type of inflammation, which we call eosinophilic inflammation, or otherwise? And today I am a big proponent of the new set of medication which we use for difficult or severe asthma, which are called biological therapy. They may be expensive, but they're extremely effective and reduce or prevent the need for use of steroids in treating or controlling these diseases. I would highly recommend that you see your doctor, or if you ever need consult, you can always come. You can always come to us, and we can help you with your difficult to treat asthma.
Right. Thank you, Doctor. We have time for just one more question, and we have a few more questions, but I'm taking this one because he's mentioned his age and gender. This is Sumerchan Jain. He says he's a chronic asthma patient, but has learned to keep it quiet. He develops very chronic cough sometimes, and he's not able to free himself with all the antibiotics and cough syrup. He says he avoids all types of fats, maida, or mawa. Is there a way to control it? He asks. I'm not very sure whether you'll be able to take this
Mr.
question.
Jain, I think I should answer your question because I understand that you're 80 and you're in significant distress. And the biggest problem is you aren't able to communicate to anybody about how you feel.
Right.
This amounts to an extremely difficult situation for an elderly person who can't breathe and who can't express himself and has to keep quiet because of social reasons. You need to seek help from your doctor and understand the severity of your asthma. If it is, you need to get onto the right set of medication. Antibiotics are a strict no-no. I have not, I mean, from whatever history you told me, I don't see an active infection which would require an antibiotic. And cough syrups are merely suppressing your cough. They're not treating the reason for your cough. The reason why you are probably coughing in asthma is because your tubes, as I've shown you earlier, are constricted or have become narrow. When you are having these narrow tubes, you need to open these tubes up. And to open these tubes up, you end up coughing. When you take a cough suppressant or a cough syrup, you are taking medicines to prevent this cough from happening. As a result, your tubes will remain in a constricted or a narrowed state and it will not help you with your asthma. An
Right.
asthmatic should avoid cough syrups very, very strictly.
Thank you, Doctor. We have, Dr. Agarwal has been with us 8 times in the past. In the chat box, I have put all the links to the various sessions that he's conducted. You have 2 minutes to copy paste them. Of course, they are all there on the website. As always, we will be the edited video and the takeaways will be there on the website on Monday evening. Doctor, before we end, we do not have a session next week on the 11th, but I just wanted your closing remarks. This is the time, apart from AQI, this is also the time before Diwali. And you know, there are places it has reduced considerably, but still there are places where there are fireworks and all sorts of things. It is, in a sense, while it's a festive occasion, it's also a fairly unhealthy season. It's would you give one or two top level advisory to our readers here?
Well, I don't want to be a Grinch. I would want everybody to celebrate, but definitely be more responsible. Try reducing the use of fireworks. Try reducing the use of fireworks which produce large quantities of fuel and smoke. The festival actually revolves around use of fire rather than firecrackers to light up to brighten the atmosphere. Firecrackers are noisy, and you are dealing with two types of pollution, that is air and noise. Avoid them as much as possible. Celebrate and make the Diwali a wholesome experience for everyone by allowing people who have chronic conditions from being pushed into hospitals with exacerbations or worsened illness. We oftentimes find that a lot of asthma exacerbations peak immediately after Diwali, and that is because of the air pollution, not particularly only the firecrackers, but also the use of diyas and incense sticks inside the homes, in homes which are poorly ventilated. So this Diwali, when you are doing your puja, when you are using the incense stick, when you are lighting up your diyas, try and ensure that there is sufficient ventilation so that the smoke does not stagnate inside the rooms of your home.
Very well said. Thank you, Doctor. To all of you here, we will not be having a session next Saturday, that is the 11th, because of Diwali. We will be back again on the 18th, which is a Saturday once again. And because 14th is World Diabetes Day, we will be having a session on diabetes on the 18th at 5 o'clock. So please be there. The details of the session will, of course, be there. For those of you who want to register for our health webinar, the link is there on our on the chat window. As always, you can register and we will inform you in advance. Otherwise, of course, you can keep checking our websites and our social platforms and we'll be there. Thank you once again, uh, Dr. Agrawal, for being here. And thank you all for being there and wish you a very happy festive season ahead. Thank you.
Subscribe now and press the bell icon. Never miss an update.